the communities where we live and work.
Efforts to help the unhoused population in the islands has been a continual struggle for decades. What are the state and local organizations doing to help solve this enduring problem? And how has the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling this summer impacted the way cities deal with houseless individuals in Hawaii? Join the conversation as we provide an update on the efforts to end homelessness. Next on Insights.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Lauren Day. Homelessness has been a persistent issue throughout our state for decades. Many state leaders and elected officials make promises every year to help end homelessness in Hawaii. So what is being done at the county and state levels to address this problem? Tonight, we will get an update on the efforts to end homelessness. We will talk with those working to provide solutions and those working to protect the rights of those affected individuals. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you will find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii YouTube page. Now to our guests in studio. John Mizuno is the director of the statewide Office on Homelessness and Housing Solutions. He served the Kalihi District in Honolulu in the Hawaii House of Representatives from 2006 to 2024. Before working in the legislature, he was a special investigator for the state of Hawaii. Sam Moku was appointed by Mayor Blangiardi as the City and County of Honolulu's homeless coordinator in January. Prior to his appointment, he served as the mayor's chief of staff. He worked in executive roles at Hawaii Pacific University from 2013 to 2021, including vice president and the executive director of athletics and community relations. Salma Rizvi is the executive director and CEO of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, of Hawaii. She is the founder of the American Muslim Bar Association. She has a law degree from NYU, a MS from Georgetown, and a BA from Johns Hopkins University. She was born in Indonesia and currently resides here in Honolulu with her husband and children. Jennifer Dara Okike is an associate professor of sociology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She received her PhD in sociology from Brown University. She is also a member of the group Hui Aloha, which does outreach and supports community building with the houseless population here on Oahu. John, I want to start with you. At the state level, what is being done to try and fight this problem and address the homeless situation here in Hawaii?
Yeah, we're doing our best to build kauhale, build beds for people who are homeless. There's no more powerful medicine for homelessness than housing. Housing's got to be the top medicine for anyone in need. Our homeless people suffer trauma, and housing is the best medicine for them.
Mm-hmm. And then Sam, you cover Honolulu County. At the county level, obviously Oahu has the largest number of homeless individuals. What's being done here?
Well, I think the partnership with our bosses has been unprecedented. I think the partnership will be an effective part of building the kahales, not just on Oahu, but across the island nation. And having, as John said, having shelter and housing for our homeless is the goal.
John, can you give us an update? Where are we right now with our homeless situation here in Hawaii? I know we have a graphic, and I think we'll pull up those numbers. Have those numbers gotten better? Are they getting worse? Where are we?
Seems to follow a trend. National trend is about a 12% uptick in homelessness. Oahu, very similar, 12% uptick. Neighbor islands, flat. Some of the other neighbor islands actually went down, but we're the most populated on Oahu. But going back to what Sam had mentioned, this unprecedented relationship, friendship, Sam Moku, myself, Mayor Blangiardi, Governor Green, we really feel that this close-knit collaboration and partnership can change the tide and really address homelessness for the first time in probably over two or three decades. There's no secret sauce to ending homelessness, but with this type of relationship, we think we can successfully manage homelessness for the first time.
As you were just talking, we pulled up that graphic. I think it said 6,200, if I'm remembering the number correctly. Maybe we'll pull it up one more time. Homeless individuals on any given night in Hawaii. When was that number taken? How accurate do you think that number is?
It was taken January. I remember, gosh, we were there at 5:30 in the morning doing the point-in-time count. That number is, well, it's accurate best. It's a snapshot. If we were to go in the back area of Wahiawa, Whitmore, deep into Waianae Valley, other places, even in Hawaii Kai, there are places off the beaten path that you have a number of homeless that aren't even counted. But snapshot of homelessness pursuant to HUD compliance, that's kind of a decent count. Not exactly accurate, but decent.
Sam, I'll let you chime in on this. The other number we had on the screen, 34% chronically homeless. What does that mean? What does chronically homeless mean?
That means that we need to have beds of many flavors. Not one size fits all. You need shelters for kupunas. You need shelters for families. You need shelters for individual males who are drug addicted or they're mentally ill. And so that's part of the strategy that the state and city is looking at is, building different beds of many flavors.
Jennifer, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you teach at the University of Hawaii. You cover sociology, very broad topic, but I know you focus on homelessness, at least for part of the class. Are these numbers concerning to you?
Oh, absolutely. At UH in the Department of Sociology, where I have sociology students, and I'm very happy to see that John Mizuno is one of our sociology alum. I teach courses on urban sociology, and absolutely, this issue resonates with our students, our faculty, our entire community. We know that we're facing crises. We're all concerned about our neighbors on the street. Our students live the housing crunch. We all live the housing crunch. They know how hard it is to get housing. One of the things I try to emphasize in my classes is to destigmatize the issue. And to say, hey, let's break up some myths. What are the causes? What are the root causes of homelessness, right? Lack of housing, right? As our leaders have shared here, right? Lack of permanently affordable housing. And it's no surprise, therefore, that Hawaii, as second only to California, if anywhere in the country, has the highest rental housing costs. So it's no surprise that we're regularly, unfortunately, leading in terms of per capita homeless rates. So I try to get my students to think in that big picture way, right? That it's really about housing. There's many folks who are challenged in getting stable housing. It doesn't make them fundamentally different. And I think there's a risk that we face in our conversations and even our imagery around homelessness that can be it can be stigmatizing. It can create and perpetuate stereotypes.
Sam, I'm curious from the ACLU perspective, you hear that 12% number of increase in homelessness across the country. It's gone up here in Hawaii. Is that concerning?
Oh, of course. The numbers are concerning, but so too are the conditions in which our houseless neighbors exist every day. And at the ACLU of Hawaii, we want to make sure that rights are adorned equally to all citizens. Even if you don't have a house, even if you don't have money, even if you're on the street, you have basic constitutional rights and constitutional freedoms that have to be granted. And so I know that there's always this debate between, public safety, those we see on the streets, as well as the autonomy and the freedom of houseless folks. And really, what the ACLU of Hawaii tries to do is to ensure that as we're finding solutions to these crises, to the houseless crises, that we are also ensuring that folks are treated with dignity and respect, due process, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and are not treated with cruel or unusual punishment. What is most concerning is that there is this link between the carceral system and our housing, our unhoused, unsheltered folks. So over 60% of those in our Hawaii state prisons are there without actually being convicted of any crime. They're there on pre-trial detention, and they can't afford bail. And the vast majority of those folks are houseless. And so you can kind of see this ushering of our neighbors. And now with the increase in houselessness, you might see the ushering of more of our neighbors into the system that is very difficult to come out of. And that's what we're looking at the ACLU of Hawaii, how to make sure that they are protected.
Obviously, we'll get into a little bit more of the root cause and number of beds, that sort of thing. But Jennifer, you also have experience actually being out there, talking to people who lost their homes. I'm curious if you can share maybe some of the stories that you can think of. Have they shared to you, how they got there? Or, we hear this 12% number. I would love to hear from someone who works with them directly.
Yeah, and I'll actually point to a different number as well to keep in mind. So speaking of Honolulu, we have about 4,500 of that 6,000 or so statewide, and 62% of the latest point in time were considered unsheltered, meaning living in underpasses, beaches, parks, cars, sidewalks. And so in some of the research that I've done with colleagues, we've talked to we've talked to folks firsthand about what they're experiencing. And as you mentioned, doing volunteer work with Hui Aloha, that's also given me a chance to get to know folks firsthand who are living unsheltered or who may be in and out of different kinds of transitional or emergency housing situations. And I will say that, people are people. So the things that, I've heard are like the things that I talk to my own family about, right? But some of the most striking and concerning things have to do with what Salma was getting at in terms of how people experienced both the difficulties of finding a stable and healthy place to live, as well as facing some of the, whether they're called enforcements. And what that means is ticketing, citation, threats of citation, requirement to move or relocate. And both in my research and Hui Aloha work, I heard stories that absolutely broke my heart. And those were surprising. I think they'd be surprising to all of us, right? We don't want that. We don't intend that, right? We have certain policies that are meant to do important things for the public, but that's what pulled me to be involved in the ACLU lawsuit, because just hearing people losing medication, people losing cherished family photos, identifications. One of the plaintiffs in your case had a partner who required a specialized wheelchair. And unfortunately, through some enforcement actions, because they had nowhere else to go, they were staying in a park, and her wheelchairs would get removed. And it was very hard for them to get it back. And so those stories were just really concerning, and shows how hard it is, on top of how hard it is to find and afford a stable place to live, that people were unfortunately facing a lot of hardship due to some of the policing. And I don't hold it against city agencies or state agencies. I know they're good folks, really, who care, trying to do the right thing. But that was one thing I learned both in my research and my housing outreach.
Have they shared maybe what are some of the challenges for them about why they don't go to a shelter or a kahale? I know, that's obviously something I've heard community members say, like, well, why do we have these shelters? Why don't they go there? Well,
as Sam put it beautifully, there's a need for housing of many flavors, right? So, I think the first issue we all need to focus on is just the dire lack of affordable housing, affordable rental housing, permanent affordable rental housing, right? That's the first issue. And so then we get into, okay, when people don't have that, what are the options? So emergency shelters are options, transitional shelters, supportive housing. So you're asking about emergency shelters. What's the issue there? When we look at the big picture, it's sort of numbers at an annual basis. There's actually not enough emergency beds to meet, to satisfy the needs of some 4,500 people on this island, at least on a given night, that don't have a place to stay permanently. So that's a mismatch, right? There actually aren't even enough beds, in my opinion, right, in that big picture sense. In addition to that, there are sort of practical and functional barriers, right? So imagine you're a kupuna and you can't get up on a top bunk, right? And that's the spot available. You can't go there, right? So you need those many flavors. Imagine you do need wheelchair accessible. Well, not all of the emergency shelters are going to be able to accommodate that. So those are some of the functional barriers. Folks love their pets. We all love our pets, right? And that was something that came up in the ACLU lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, folks who wanted, maybe even were very willing to go to emergency shelters. Maybe they have 3 pets. Maybe they have 4 pets. Maybe they have a partner. Location is something that is important to folks. Folks need to be near jobs. They need to be near ohana. They locational constraints without cars. So there are many practical and functional challenges to accessing emergency shelters. But again, the real issue is there's just not enough, which is why it's really heartening to see this commitment to coordinate to creating permanently affordable housing of all types.
Sam, earlier, since we're on this topic of the different options out there, we need more flavors of housing. Tell us the difference between a kauhale and a shelter for those who don't know.
So you have shelters. The kauhales are the state has been looking at various sites for kauhales. So you have a medical respite. That's a shelter, considered a shelter. It's not a permanent shelter, but it's there to help homeless to get triage on any medical issues they have, as well as be able to recover from any addiction if they have. You also have family shelters. Waikiki Vista is one of those shelters that Catholic Charity runs. You have male shelters that Connie Mitchell runs, IHS runs. And so those beds are many flavors. And actually, when we create our shelter in Iwilei Center with 100 beds, you'll have Connie, who's looking at doing a really nice shelter for those who need that one step or that one month they need in order to get to permanent shelter. And so it's about moving them through the process. It doesn't work for everybody, but there's ways to move our homeless from one to the next stage in order to get them back into society. Yeah.
John, can we build more kauhales? Do we have enough shelters?
100%. We need to build more kauhale at light speed. We need more beds. Every bed counts. Every life counts. We're in a fight to save lives. I did want to expound upon something that Salma and Dr. Jennifer had mentioned, especially on behalf of Sam and I. We actually appreciate ACLU and we appreciate their fight to ensure civil rights for our people. That's the right thing to do. We love that Jennifer and Salma fight to protect the rights of homeless. We support this fight, and Sam and I are working for homeless to have the right to health care. Sam and I are fighting for homeless to have the right for mental health, the right for social health services to deal with their addiction, our people that come back from defending our country, the right to get the proper health for trauma that they've suffered defending our country. The most important right will probably be, well, in addition to the right to enjoy life and liberty, the right to housing. Mm-hmm. Housing, I said this before, is the most powerful medicine for anyone who's homeless. So we agree with Salma and Dr. Jennifer. We appreciate what ACLU is doing. It is a balancing test, and so still in agreement with ACLU. We have to balance it and also say that the community has a right to feel safe in their neighborhood also. And for people that may have a disability, I have people that are friends that are in wheelchairs. They have the right to go through a crosswalk and go through a sidewalk without being blocked by a tent or a structure. So it's, at the end of the day, it's protecting everyone's rights, and we appreciate what ACLU and Dr. Jennifer is doing. We actually are in alignment, and we're grateful for their work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sam, I want to go to you. There's a big Supreme Court decision that was in the news recently on their decision on the Grants Pass case. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and where does the ACLU stand on it, and how does it impact Hawaii's houseless individuals?
Yeah, of course. So the Grants Pass case is a shocking and somewhat horrible decision that has come out of the U.S. Supreme Court. As we know, there's been a number of very regressive decisions coming out of our highest court. This decision essentially holds that it is it is okay for municipalities to essentially criminalize houseless neighbors even if they don't have anywhere else to go. This decision overturns a U.S. Court of Appeals Ninth Circuit precedent, a case called Martin v. Boies, that had said that the city cannot enforce public ordinances against our houseless neighbors if there are not enough available shelter beds to provide them a safe space to live. This case for Martin v. Boies was an instrumental case in trying to, as John said, establish a right to housing and to ensure that folks are treated with dignity. The Supreme Court overturned that case now. And so now what we're expecting to see across the country is more enforcement of these public ordinances, whether those are anti-camping ordinances, sit-lie ordinances, trespassing ordinances against houseless neighbors that have nowhere else to go. And in that opinion, Justice Sotomayor said, this opinion is essentially unconstitutional and unconscionable. She did not agree with the majority of the court, and she understood that sleep is a biological necessity. So we're essentially criminalizing people who are sleeping on the street that have nowhere else to go. How is that not cruel or unusual punishment? And insofar as how this impacts Hawaii, I know that there have been a number of state officials that say despite this decision, you're not going to see more enforcement. You know, the state is going to continue, the police is going to continue to engage as they've been engaging. And we'll be watching at the ACLU of Hawaii. We at the ACLU of Hawaii believe that this case is a federal decision that interprets the federal Constitution and the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual clause. We here at the state of Hawaii, we have our Hawaii state constitution that provides for other mechanisms of protection. So our constitution, Article 1, Section 2, does not use the word cruel and unusual like the federal constitution. It uses the words cruel or unusual, meaning that there's still room for us to interpret laws and protections of houseless neighbors under our own state constitution. And there's also Article 9, Section 10, there's something called the splintered paddle law, which is a law that was actually implemented by King Kamehameha. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, but he had gone to Puna, and at that time there was a fishing community, and he was hit with a paddle that splintered. And in that moment, he had this overwhelming compassion to say that folks who are laying in the street, have nowhere else to go, have the right to sleep. And that law has not yet been fully enforced or interpreted under our state constitution. It applies to everyone. So there's a number of mechanisms that I think we can use to push back on the Supreme Court decision locally.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to hear you chime in on this. How does the county decide when to enforce, when to do sweeps, that sort of thing? So
just let me be clear. We have ordinances, stored property ordinances, and the SNO, which is the sidewalk nuisance. That's not a homeless strategy. You know, it's about public spaces, the sidewalks, and parks that are being used for, like, if I was to go and put a tent in the park, you know, I would get cited. And so if you have what our city folks, we go and engage, we give notice of how we're going to go about our stored property ordinance. And it's important that we give notice to ACLU. Everybody knows what time it's going to happen, and we're basically making sure that our public has access to, walking on the sidewalks, having a fair right of way into businesses, etc. So, I think what the city is doing on that front has nothing to do with homelessness. It's what John and I are trying to do, is to build more shelters so that when these enforcements happen, our HPD asks and service providers are also aware of this, and we help them find shelter, bed spaces from whatever sources we have available.
I'm going to get to some of our viewer questions because we've got a lot coming in. Since we're on this topic, Eric in Kailua is asking, following what your ACLU representative was saying, I'd like to hear from the state and city people on how the police and judiciary are included in the efforts to end homelessness. They are charged with enforcing the law, but are the laws fair? This one's for Sam or John. I'll let either of you take the lead.
Yeah, I think you better go, John.
Okay, thanks. At this point, if they're not violating the law, we're not, well, first of all, okay, to address the Grants Pass decision and the effect for the state, and if there's going to be enforcement, let me just flat out say, under Governor Green's administration, we don't do sweeps, just flat out. The state does not conduct sweeps. Okay, got that out of the way. Now, how do we best help our people in need? We focus on relocation. So if I'm a homeless guy, we work to get me into a place, a kauhale. Again, I've suffered trauma, I need help. Kauhale would be the best answer. It's like a village. It's going to be provided, I'm going to be provided as a homeless person with wraparound services, health care. I'm going to have meals, showers, restroom, security. This is going to allow me to recover, heal, and get better and get on my feet. So that's the whole concept. Again, state does not do sweeps. Second, we would like to relocate people that would like relocation into a kauhale. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is it's not going to fit for everyone. If I'm the guy that just does not want any help, I'm not going to go to kauhale. I don't think I answered the question completely, but at least for the state, that's our position, no sweeps.
Since we're on the topic of kauhales, I've got a couple of questions from our viewers on that. Bill in McCully is asking, how long can someone stay in a kauhale unit?
You want me to get it or you want to get it? So me and Sam work, it
really
depends.
depends,
If they go to the city resource center, it's a triage center, so they're probably going to be there no more than 3 months, 4 months, because IHS and Connie will try to triage and get them into permanent support housing, which will fit them. For other kauhale, kupuna kauhale, we have seniors that are homeless. They would be there probably forever. Yep. So it kind of depends. Beds of many flavors, Sam had mentioned. So it all depends. Connie Mitchell has drug rehab, detox kauhale. For me, if I get out of detox, I stay there. Usually after the 6-month, 8-month, 9-month period, I then move out to permanent support housing. That bed opens up and another person comes in. For reentry, I'm getting out of prison. That would probably be 6 months to a year. Go into a village of redemption, stay there for 6 months, 8 months, get a job, move out to permanent support housing. So I hope I answered that question.
John, I'm actually going to stay on you. This question's for you. Okay. Caller from Mililani, regarding the kauhale, why won't the state build them in state land? For example, the 26 acres in Pearl City the state owns. And then I'm going to kind of tie it into Moana's question here. She's asking about, she wants to know anything new as far as recent facilities that have been opened or anything that the city and the state is working on.
Oh, we've got a number of projects.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay, state land. First one, yeah. Good question. State land. It depends. And Sam and I, we work together on this. Probably it's best to have infrastructure. We'd love to have water, sewer, electricity. If we can connect to sewer, that's great. Connectivity to water, excellent. For electricity, we're moving to solar now because it's a lot cheaper. It's more expensive at the start, but it's cheaper in the long run. If they do not have that connectivity, we're out off the grid. It's very expensive. We've got a place on Middle Street. It's costing us significant amounts of money because we don't have solar, so we're paying about $40,000 a month in diesel fuel for generators to provide electricity. The sewer, we're not connected to a sewer line. Every 2 days, wastewater is taken out, costing about $40,000 a month. That is not practical. So as we learn and evolve from our first kauhale, we're beginning to be more efficient. So even though we have land, it has to be good land. The community has to be open to this and accept the kauhale in that area. And we need to get infrastructure.
And then going back to Moana's question, she's asking about, hasn't the city and state opened new facilities or about to open new facilities? She basically wants to know what's new when it comes to what the city and the state is doing to address homelessness.
You should take that. We got Waikiki Vista and the two big ones.
So Waikiki Vista is one of those shelters for families that we mentioned. Catholic Charities is running that. We also just opened up a medical respite with Dr. Miskovich at our
First One Bank.
we call it the A'ala respite, and They have about 30 medical beds inside and 30 small kauhale units on the parking lot area. In Iwilei Center, we are embarking on another partnership with the state, and Connie Mitchell and another service provider will be we're building 100 beds in the Iwilei Center.
So there's the 100-bed center, but the other one with Connie Mitchell is 68 to 75 beds, right?
Yes, yes. And then eventually there'll be a kahale in Iwilei. Right. In the empty empty DOH lot.
And we're pivoting to the west side because the two hotspots, and Sam had made this a point when we got together, the two hotspots with approximately 1,000 homeless each, west side, the Waianae coastline, and Iwilei. So those are the sites that Sam and I have been doing our best to try to bring kauhale to.
We also we're looking at shelters out in Hauʻula, where the city owns townhomes, and that'll also be for families. Also in Wahiawa, we're looking at, we also have townhomes in Wahiawa that will be open for families.
And Sam's also looking at Hawaii Kai. And stop that not in my backyard thought.
We got a list of locations that are city property owned, Waianae, Hawaii Kai, wherever, and we're looking to partner up with the state to build more shelters. I mean it's an equity thing, you know.
Yes.
What's good for one community is good for another.
So we'll put one in Hawaii Kai.
Yeah.
I'm curious, since we're on the topic of beds, John is asking, you keep saying there's a lack of housing and shelter space, but in the last point in time counts, there were hundreds of empty beds noted. So how is there a lack of bed space? I'll just throw this out there, let any of you chime in. Is that true that there's a lack of bed space, or is it just getting people in those beds can be?
I think it's a combination of both, you know. I think, but it's getting them in the bed. You know, it's not going to work the first time, you know, but you got to be diligent, right? I mean, eventually, you know, they might see the light, and it's time to, you know, move in and get their life back in order.
That and Sam, we've been having a hard time getting our shelters filled, but the kauhale has been easy. Because they have 3 meals a day, shower, restroom. They're independent. They have privacy. So kauhales are always filled 100%. So we need to focus on building more kauhale and get more beds filled. But yeah, Sam's right. We would love that all the shelters are filled, but they're not. But for kauhale, people love them. They're 100% filled.
Can I speak to that issue? And I want to underscore the need for multiple durable solutions, right? And absolutely kauhale. Proven solutions include vouchers, right? Various kinds of vouchers, whether they be housing first vouchers or regular Section 8 programs. In the recent point in time count, I noticed a real success in the increase from 286 to 900 individuals who are able to leverage federal funds for emergency housing vouchers. Public housing, there's a commitment from our Hawaii Public Housing Authority to build 10,000 more units. So this is what is desperately needed, and it speaks to this question of, well, why on a given night are some, if you're an individual looking for a place to stay, it could be very, very hard, especially, for example, if you have other barriers, including disability, right? I mean, actually, as a side point, we know that over 2/3 have of the homeless, both sheltered and unsheltered, have disabling conditions, right? So that's a real issue. So there is a real hardship in finding a place when you need it. At the same time, one of my colleagues calls it the revolving door, right? Emergency shelters are not the end point. Some kauhale could be, right? If they are made to be permanent. Now, not all kauhale are going to be permanent. So that's a really important policy issue for you to face, because people need permanent affordable housing. So what research has shown is that you have shelters and people are using homeless services. They're overwhelmingly using homeless services, but our state homeless data shows that folks exiting from services, the majority of them are going back into homelessness, or we don't know, which is probably a highly unstable situation. So what's desperately needed, I keep saying the same thing, but permanently affordable housing and deeply affordable housing. And that's why coordination is needed, right? Leveraging different kinds of housing options.
I do want to say,
supportive housing.
Just on the vouchers, you know, Mayor Blangiardi went up to DC with the mayor's conference and did request, I want to say about $50 million for vouchers for the city, because the city has vouchers and the state has Section 8 vouchers. So, yes.
And the numbers too, I think I would love for the viewers to, you know, while there may be empty bed spaces at different shelters, it doesn't mean that there are enough beds to provide for the need in the community. As we saw, the snapshot was, I guess, 4,500 or so in January, but Dr. Jennifer, your research shows if we take into culmination all of the potential avenues for relief when it comes to bed, there might be at most 2,500. So you're still having about half of your houseless population even having no option or nowhere else to go. And this is why under previous law that just got overturned by Grants Pass, it was unconscionable for the government to remove people and, you know, in these sweeps and displace folks because they had nowhere else to go. And as we know, in the state of Hawaii, we have one of the largest out-migration rates in the country. More people are moving out of our state than settling in because of the housing crisis. And we also know that there is kind of a racial injustice component of this. The vast majority of folks who are unhoused are Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, you know, and so it's really interesting to consider that our houseless neighbors are not necessarily unique. 1 out of 4 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and with the rising cost of living in Hawaii and our groceries, and everyone knows how hard it is and how hard the struggle and the hustle is here in the state, it's only a matter of time. That's why people are choosing to leave with their dignity than stay here and be houseless and then be exposed to a number of enforcement actions and making them further kind of vulnerable in this society and this system.
I wanted to add to Salma, Dr. Jennifer, I'll go real quick. Please. I agree 100%. We need more housing. And we believe, Salma and I believe, Kauhale is the answer. And even as we house our people that are homeless, nothing precludes us from also using Kauhale for affordable rental units. We'd much rather have our people go into a Kauhale than leave to the mainland because they can't afford it. So even notwithstanding some people or viewers saying that you still got some empty beds and shelters, why do we need more Kauhale? We do. Not only for the people that are homeless, but for people that are facing housing instability because of the high cost of living. So we've got to continue to build Kauhale and get beds for people.
Do you have a goal in mind, like a number of Kauhale that you would like to see built?
Yes. We are actually, met with the governor Wednesday morning, and I told him I think we are exceeding our expectations. Working with Sam and Mayor Blangiardi, along with the other mayors, we anticipate we might be able to get 1,000 beds, new beds, before the end of 2024. We thought we were only going to get about 500, so we're exceeding. Mm-hmm. And the year after that, we think we can get another 500, 600. So now you're seeing, if we can create up to, hypothetically in 3 years, 2,000 beds, that's huge, because now you're going to get close to your mark of cutting chronically homeless, almost in half. And if we're able to do that and maintain that for 3 or 4 years, we'll do something that no other state in this nation has done. We'll have found a secret sauce to address homelessness. And if we do that, other states will copycat what we have. They will replicate. So we're trying to be bold, we're trying to be epic, we're trying to make history.
And these are Kauhale beds?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify one thing about the question about why are there empty, unused beds. The best data that I was able to find through your office, actually, was reviewing the vacancy grid reports for a 3-month sample of months in 2023. The range, according to that data source, was between 3 and 55 beds. So if you think about 1,800 people living unsheltered on a given night, you can see that by that measure, which is a different measure than the one we've been talking about the annual rates, by that measure, there's an extreme shortage of even emergency beds, and we're all sort of saying we need more than emergency beds, although, grateful to the folks, trying to provide those services, they're certainly needed as well and welcome.
You know, we're talking about the number of beds. Tim from Kaimaki, though, is asking, do we have any kind of idea, numbers-wise, as far as the population of homeless who are impacted by when it comes to mental illness or drug addiction?
Sam, 25 to 30%, I think.
Right around there.
Drug addiction, mental
Yeah.
conditions, yeah. I will say this though, just about everyone who is homeless has suffered trauma, some worse
Right.
than others.
Ellen from Makiki, this is a question I think for Salma, and then other folks can chime in. How do we balance what the ACLU fights for, equal rights for all, against security concerns in the community? Many homeless are harmless, but others are not, and there are documented cases of harassment or worse of families, including children. At some point, a community gets to fight back. This is one everyone could probably weigh in on.
Yeah, of course. Well, at the ACLU of Hawaii, we really care about public safety. Actually, just last month, we held a Reimagining Public Safety retreat, and it was held with a number of community partners across the state who came together to say, hey, this is our current response to houselessness. Our first response is often houseless folks being met with police, even if they are no danger to themselves or to the community. There's often this, abundance of police interaction with folks who, as John just mentioned, are already traumatized and may have been through the system. And so even having that police interaction as the first kind of end-all be-all is problematic and can lead to whether that's behaviors and recidivism or wanting to go back in. So I think the way in which our houseless neighbors are approached is also leading to other public safety issues that compound one another. And I think that really, rather than addressing those on the street who may seem like they're a danger to others, but it's clear they have mental health issues and they need help, there are other models around the country that we can look to. Oregon has something called the Cahoots model, where really, rather than sending folks to police officers to try to manage a public safety situation, you're sending mental health providers who are also trained in the first instance of relief. So I think that there's a number of different ways in which, we can make sure that balance is nicely reached. And even with our last lawsuit, when we said that, we wanted to ensure that houseless folks have the right to this biological necessity to sleep and not be continuously displaced, we also acknowledged the need for, we didn't, argue against those who needed to cross the street for different sidewalk ordinances. We said, yes, of course, we understand. We also do so much disability rights work. We understand the need for pathways for things to be clear. It's just a matter of, in spaces where they're, houseless neighbors are not bothering anyone, we want to make sure that they are protected, which goes back to, even if the governor has a policy of no sweeps, I live in downtown Chinatown. I see what's happening every day. There might be a policy of no sweeps, but definitely you see HPD and the harassment of houseless neighbors, and you see sort of the seizing and sometimes destruction of property. And to us, it's like, well, where's the public safety for our houseless neighbors, and where is their sense of, they're already so vulnerable on the street, and then they're being deprived further and further. So we actually had a beautiful victory in the Supreme Court this past spring, in a case called Davis v. Bisson. In that case, the U.S. Supreme Court had held that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and property, and houseless folks have a property interest in their belongings, in the wheelchair, in the passport, in the things that, sometimes get caught up in sweeps. And so the Supreme Court said that the municipalities have to engage in a public hearing first. There is a right to a hearing before the seizing and destruction of houseless property. And so we just want to make sure that precedent by the Hawaii Supreme Court is also enforced.
So I just want to dovetail on that. So on our stored property ordinance, we give 24-hour notice. We post enforcement rules online prior to the enforcement. We physically tag the properties that will be removed. We store the property for at least 45 days before disposal to give ample opportunity for the residents to claim their property if they like. While under the ordinance charge, there's no storage fees. There's, we waive all of the residents we waive the fees basically. And, this has been going on. We've had this ordinance for years, and we're actually, the county of Honolulu is actually, other counties from other states are actually doing what we're doing in our SPO.
I wanted to add to, thanks Sam, that people have the right to feel safe in their house and in their community. That's so important. We need to respect that right. Exactly what Sam was saying, and I agree with her, homeless should have rights too. Mm-hmm. Many of our homeless have a mental condition, an addiction, or other trauma. So we need to be akamai about how we address homeless, and we just don't have enforcement. So I agree with Salma. I think that Sam and the city and mayor have done a great job with CORE, with medical respite through Dr. Miskovich, and with HONU. So instead of having me who might be shouting, maybe I'm in a manic state, Sam will send maybe Dr. Miskovich or Ireland through CORE to get me, instead of getting arrested, maybe I just need a little bit of medical help. And I think the city's been doing a pretty good job at that.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, you study people. I was hoping that you could touch on a little bit of what Salma was talking about. What does that do to an individual who's houseless when they are cited or they get their belongings taken away and they have to move? You can talk on at a human level.
Yeah, I've heard people say it was the worst day of my life. People have described the experience of, one plaintiff had counted over 150 citations for, stored property ordinances. Again, very understandable at the same time. This person literally had nothing else to do with this property, right? So people described it as it felt like I was being stabbed. It felt like I was being treated less than human. That was definitely a theme in a study that we completed. This was a while ago in 2015. We heard a lot of kind of those themes of feeling dehumanized, feeling overwhelmed with worry and anxiety. When people had to go to work or had to go take care of things, being so worried, what do I do with my things? Am I gonna lose everything? Am I gonna have to use what little savings I have to start again? So that can be, that worry could be very overwhelming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With just a couple minutes left, Shannon in Hawaii Kai is asking, what percentage of homeless people follow instructions and take steps to do what it takes to improve their lives and find shelter, permanent shelter? Ooh. I don't know if you have an exact number, but
that's a good question. I actually don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that.
And I think the method of housing first rather than handcuffs or care first, jail last. I think these mechanisms, what I'm so happy to hear, John and Sam really being partners in this fight for greater housing, because housing has to come first for folks to be able to take care of themselves. When it comes to the plan for the amount of beds that we can safely provide over a 3-year period, potentially 2,000 beds, I am concerned about the speed of that. And the reason being is because we spend $250 a day jailing one person in the state of Hawaii. Imagine if those resources were diverted, especially considering that many of those folks are only sitting in jail because they can't afford maybe a $500, $200 bail. If they instead were given housing and were not stigmatized or dehumanized or being seen as criminals for poverty. What we see is that there's this criminalization of poverty, and there's so much political will to fund new jails, fund prisons. How about we all partner together next legislative season and create new legislation to gain the political will to establish more funding, to divert funding from our jails and into housing
I'd
first.
I'd like to invite you, Selma, to meet with City Prosecutor Alm the state public defender, and my office, we're working on a diversionary program. Instead of sending a person to jail, to have housing for that person right next to, it's in the lawyer's building, by the way. We're going to have a meeting probably next week. I'd like you to be at that meeting and help us with our diversionary program. Instead of going to jail, they'll have a place to stay outside of jail.
Great, thank you.
See, this is why doing these insights where we can, spend an hour on a topic is so important to connect our community leaders. Since we're on the topic, as Selma was talking about, what's next, where do people go? Bonnie in Pearl City is asking, what is the next step from a kauhale after a few months? Where do they go? And kind of on the similar topic, Veronica's asking, what housing can homeless afford, after they're ready to move out of a kauhale?
In a kauhale, they're going to stay there. Some kauhale, like Sam had mentioned, is just for 3 months, 6 months triage until they go into permanent support housing. Other kauhale will be forever. They'll be there forever. They're going to get Medicaid, SNAP, which is food stamps. We're going to try to make sure they qualify for SSI, SSDI, general assistance, and they'll generally be paying rent. Nobody knows that or knew that. Who would have thought a homeless person will pay $250 to $300 per month after the 6-month period if they can afford that. If not, they can always work or help out with security. Everyone will be a part of something special. That's the kauhale model. They can stay there as long as they want.
Jennifer, with just a couple minutes left, Tony from Waianae is asking if we can spend a couple minutes acknowledging the passing of Auntie Twinkle and what she's been able to contribute to our community.
Thank you for that. I think everyone here feels that. It was so recent. I don't really have words, to say except for. I think everybody here, everybody who heard of her, was touched by her in some way, can say that she is a model for all of us for living selflessly. Aloha was not a cliche for Auntie Twinkle, and just her ability to give and connect and believe in people, and connect with them and help them when everybody else had given up on them. Maybe they'd given up themselves. So I think it's a loss that's still very raw. And mahalo to that person for just opening space to really acknowledge her and really mourn her and celebrate her. And I'm sure others.
Yeah, Auntie Twinkle's, she led the fight for her ohana, really. That was her ohana, the homeless there on the west side, along with Auntie Blanche on the windward side. They kind of set the model of how our homeless can thrive, in Ahupua'a, and in their hale that they're building on the Mauka side of Waianae, and she'll be remembered for a long time. Mm-hmm.
I was just with her last week. Before she passed away, she looked fine, but she instilled character and dignity in the people that she helped. Mm-hmm. Just imagine one person, a matriarch, helping 200 formerly houseless now have homes. So if we can have an example of that, and times that times 3, that could be 600 people that can now have homes. So that's the vision that we need to have. Her vision, as well as Auntie Blanche's vision and Pastor Kim's vision. Those are the 3 top people that have helped our homeless communities in our state.
Staying on you, John, we started with talking about the numbers, seeing that unfortunate upward trend across the country. But with, what we discussed tonight with everybody and where things are at, do you feel hopeful that the state can get a grip and help our homeless community?
Yes, and the fact that Selma, Dr. Jennifer, Sam, and I are all here, I feel very positive. Let's be realistic. No secret sauce of solving homelessness are already been solved. But this is a great opportunity. We need all sectors of government, faith-based organizations, communities, nonprofits, businesses, churches, universities, donors to collectively harness all of our energies together for a watershed moment to address homelessness in the state of Hawaii. I believe we can do it, and we would be the first state in the nation to do that. It's not going to happen in 1 month or 6 months. It'll take a couple years, but I think with the people we have here and the people in our state, we can do this.
Sam, what about you at the county level? How are you feeling about trying to get this problem?
Well, same as what John mentioned. You know, this is a community effort. You know, nobody's excluded from not trying to help, and I think it does start at the top. You know, and actually the grassroots people also help, and I do want to recognize the faith-based community, because that's a lot of people hear about it, maybe they're helping, but they do what they need to do, and they're not taking resources from the state or the city, but they're doing it just because the love for people. They believe in people and that they can transform them, and so having that as well as a community like Hawaii. Hawaii is all about ohana. And I think I think that's why Hawaii has a better shot at solving homeless than maybe other states.
Yeah, well, I do want to say thank you to all of you for being here tonight. This is obviously, we unfortunately ran out of time. This is a topic we could probably sit here and talk about for hours, and a hard one to address, especially as we all know the cost of living here in Hawaii. But thank you to all of you for being here this evening, for opening up the discussion. It sounds like throughout this last hour there's going to be some meetings taking place, and I think there is another connection being made here across the table this way as well. Thank you as well to our viewers for tuning in. We want to thank our guests in studio, John Mizuno, the Director of the Statewide Office of Homelessness and Housing Solutions, Salma Rizvi, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Hawaii, Sam Moku, the City and County of Honolulu's Homelessness Coordinator, and Jennifer Dara Okike, Associate Professor from UH Manoa. Next week on Insights, we turn our focus back on the election with a preview of the upcoming general election happening this November. Please join us then. I'm Lauren Day for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Have a great night.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaii are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and